Racist woman destroyed the dress thinking it was just a black waitress. Her millionaire husband saw it and the red wine splattered across the white dress like blood on fresh snow. Victoria Hartwell watched her handiwork with cruel satisfaction as the young waitress desperately tried to wipe the liquid from her skirt. "Oops," Victoria said with feigned innocence, her smile revealing perfect teeth and a rotten heart. "What a pity that people like you don't know how to move properly in civilized settings." The Boston Annual Charity Gala brought together the East Coast elite at one of the city's most exclusive hotels. Austrian crystals hung from the ceiling, imported orchids decorated each table, and the discreet sound of a string quartet created the perfect soundtrack for high society hypocrisy. Jasmine Washington was only 24 years old and never imagined that accepting that extra waitressing job would put her at the center of a racial storm that would change everything. An MBA student at Harvard, she needed the extra money to help her family and pay for her last semesters of college. Her natural hair was tied back in an elegant bun, and she carried trays with the grace of someone who grew up balancing heavy responsibilities on her shoulders. Victoria Hartwell, on the other hand, was exactly the kind of woman who considered charity events her personal catwalk. Wife of real estate mogul Robert Hartwell, she reaped all the benefits of being born rich and marrying even richer. Her life was an endless succession of charity lunches, spa treatments, and shopping sprees that cost more than entire families' annual salaries. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Jasmine said with a calmness that surprised even herself, bending down to pick up the shards of the glass Victoria had accidentally dropped. "I'll have it cleaned up right away." "Don't worry about it," Victoria replied loudly enough to attract the attention of nearby tables. "I imagine accidents are common when you hire this kind of people for important events." The venom in Victoria's words was so toxic that several people stopped their conversations to watch the scene. Jasmine felt the curious glances, some embarrassed, others clearly entertained by the free show of public humiliation. "Perhaps you should consider more qualified professionals for events of this caliber," Victoria continued, gesturing dramatically. "People who naturally understand how to behave in refined society." What Victoria didn't know was that every poisonous word was being absorbed by Jasmine with the patience of someone who had weathered much worse storms. Raised on the south side of Chicago by a single mother who worked 3 jobs, Jasmine had learned early on that true strength doesn't shout, doesn't react, it observes, learns, and acts at the right moment. "Of course, ma'am," Jasmine replied, her voice maintaining a serenity that made Victoria frown, irritated by the lack of emotional reaction. "I'll make sure everything is taken care of properly." As she made her way to the kitchen with the wreckage, Jasmine discreetly passed the main table, where an elegant gray-haired man watched the whole scene with an unreadable expression. Their eyes met for a split second, and he nodded almost imperceptibly, as if recognizing something in her that others couldn't see. Robert Hartwell had built a real estate empire based on one simple rule: observe people when they think no one is paying attention. And at that moment, watching his wife publicly humiliate a young working woman, he saw 2 things clearly: Victoria's true cruel nature and the impressive dignity of that waitress who maintained her composure under fire. In the kitchen, Jasmine finally allowed her hands to shake slightly as she discarded the shards. 20 minutes earlier, she had been just another student working to pay the bills. Now she felt a growing determination, as if the universe was preparing something much bigger than a simple night's work. What no one in that luxurious hall could have imagined was that the simple waitress Victoria had just attacked held secrets that would turn the humiliation into the catalyst for a turnaround that none of them would ever forget. If you have witnessed injustices like this and want to find out how a single night can turn the lives of those who believe they were born superior upside down, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow this story of justice that will prove that underestimating people can cost much more than any fortune. Victoria wasn't finished. While Jasmine returned from the kitchen with clean towels and a new uniform, the socialite had found her perfect audience, a circle of high society women who hung on her every word as if she were revealing the secrets of the universe. "Did you see that?" Victoria gestured dramatically, her voice laden with theatrical indignation. "The audacity of some people to think they can just infiltrate our events. Clearly someone in the organization did not screen the staff properly." Margaret Wellington, heiress to a pharmaceutical fortune, nodded vigorously. "Darling, you are absolutely right. Just yesterday I had to dismiss a maid because she had the audacity to question my cleaning methods. These people need to understand boundaries." Jasmine returned to the main hall and immediately felt the weight of their stares. Victoria's group had grown, and she could hear snippets of their venomous conversation as she replaced the glasses on the nearby table. Of course she came back. She probably needs this job desperately. Imagine if it were one of our daughters being forced to work like this. At least she knows her place and didn't try to talk back. Victoria noticed Jasmine's presence and deliberately raised her voice. Anyway, girls, I guess we shouldn't be too harsh. After all, not everyone is lucky enough to be born with a silver spoon in their mouth and receive a proper education. What Victoria didn't know was that Jasmine had graduated summa cum laude in economics from the University of Chicago before getting her place at Harvard. That she had grown up translating legal documents for her mother, who worked cleaning offices at night to support her 3 children on her own. That at 16, she was already managing the family finances and had turned the family's small savings into a fund that paid for her 2 younger brothers' college education. Jasmine finished setting the table in silence, but Margaret decided to add her own contribution to the public humiliation. "Dear," she addressed Jasmine directly, her voice dripping with condescension, "you understand that workers should remain discreet during events, don't you? Avoid drawing unnecessary attention to themselves." "Yes, ma'am," Jasmine replied, maintaining respectful but firm eye contact. "I understand perfectly." Something in Jasmine's tone made Margaret frown. There was an articulation, a presence that didn't fit the stereotype she expected to find. Victoria noticed her friend's hesitation and decided to intensify the attack. "Margaret is right. In fact," Victoria stood up, approaching Jasmine with a cruel smile, "perhaps we should have a quick chat about proper protocol. You can read, can't you?" The question was asked with calculated malice, loud enough for other tables to hear. An awkward silence spread through the nearby area, and Jasmine felt dozens of eyes fixed on her, waiting for her reaction. "Yes, ma'am. I read perfectly well," Jasmine replied, her voice maintaining the same professional calm, but something in her eyes shone differently. Victoria laughed, a high-pitched, unpleasant sound. "Great. Then maybe you can read this for us." She picked up the event menu and held it out to Jasmine. "Out loud. So we can be sure that the service staff understands exactly what is being served to the important guests." It was a calculated and cruel humiliation. Victoria wanted to force Jasmine to expose herself, hoping she would stutter, stumble over the French words on the menu, or simply refuse and give her reason to call security. Robert Hartwell, who was watching the whole scene from the head table, felt a wave of shame and anger. 23 years of marriage to Victoria had shown him many unpleasant facets of her personality, but he had never seen her be so openly cruel. Jasmine took the menu with steady hands. For a moment, she looked directly at Victoria, and for the first time that evening, allowed a small smile to touch the corner of her mouth. "With pleasure, ma'am." And then, to the utter surprise of everyone present, Jasmine began to read the menu not only fluently, but with the perfect French pronunciation she had learned during her 2-year exchange program in Lyon, funded by an academic merit scholarship. Amuse-bouche de foie gras avec gelée de champagne, suivi par le potage parmentier et ux truffes noirs du Périgord. Her voice was clear, confident, with a French accent that would make Parisians themselves jealous. The words flowed like music, each syllable pronounced with precision that revealed not only knowledge of the language, but intimate familiarity with French culinary culture. Victoria gradually paled as Jasmine continued, realizing that her plan had disastrously backfired. Margaret stared open-mouthed, and other women in the group exchanged awkward glances. "Et pour terminer, le soufflé au Grand Marnier accompagné d'une sauce anglaise à la vanille de Madagascar," Jasmine finished, returning the menu to Victoria with a serene smile. "I hope that was helpful, ma'am." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria stood still, holding the menu, completely speechless for the first time that evening. It was impossible to deny that this simple waitress possessed a level of education and sophistication that rivaled anyone in that room. Robert rose from the head table and walked slowly toward the group. His eyes met Jasmine's for a brief moment, and she saw something in them, not pity, but respect and something that looked very much like admiration. "Victoria," he said softly, his voice carrying a tone she immediately recognized as warning. "Perhaps it's time we focus on the real purpose of this evening, charity." Victoria quickly regained her composure, realizing she had lost control of the situation. "Of course, dear. Just trying to make sure everyone understood the proper protocols." Jasmine nodded respectfully and stepped away to continue her work, but not before Margaret whispered nervously to Victoria, "Darling, perhaps we misjudged the situation." Victoria grabbed Margaret's arm with unnecessary force. "We didn't misjudge anything," she hissed softly. Academic tricks don't change who she really is. And before tonight is over, I'll make sure everyone here understands that perfectly well. What Victoria couldn't have imagined was that Jasmine had spent the last 4 years systematically documenting cases of racial discrimination in corporate environments for her MBA thesis. That she had discrete recording devices, knew civil rights laws inside and out, and that every poisonous word uttered that night was being meticulously recorded. While Victoria planned her next humiliation, Jasmine walked through the room with the serenity of someone carrying a secret too powerful to be revealed before the right moment. She had learned at a young age that true strength does not shout. It observes, documents, and acts at precisely the most devastating moment. Robert returned to the main table, but he couldn't take his eyes off the young woman he had just witnessed being attacked by his own wife. There was something about that waitress that intrigued him deeply, a dignity, an intelligence that couldn't be disguised, no matter what uniform she wore. What none of those present could have imagined was that the simple worker Victoria was trying to humiliate was just weeks away from becoming the youngest senior analyst at one of the country's most prestigious consulting firms. And that every act of discrimination that night was building a case that would turn that humiliation into the catalyst for a justice none of them would ever forget. Jasmine took refuge in the hotel's elegant bathroom and finally allowed her hands to shake. Not from fear, but from a controlled adrenaline rush she knew well from her days of defending herself on the streets of Chicago. She discreetly removed a small digital recorder from her uniform pocket and checked the recording quality. Crystal clear. 23 minutes of racial slurs, explicit discrimination, and intentional humiliation, all perfectly documented. For her MBA thesis on racial microaggressions in elite corporate environments, that night had become an academic gold mine. But now, looking at her reflection in the gilded mirror, Jasmine realized that this was much bigger than a simple university research project. Jasmine. A soft voice knocked on the door. "Are you okay?" It was Robert Hartwell. Jasmine immediately recognized the voice she had heard addressing the organizers during the event. For a moment, she considered ignoring him, but something in his genuinely concerned tone made her open the door. Robert stood alone in the hallway, his hands clasped together in a posture that revealed his nervousness. "I apologize for my wife's utterly unacceptable behavior. There is no justification for what I witnessed." Jasmine studied him carefully. 24 years of life had taught her to distinguish condescending pity from genuine respect. In Robert's eyes, she saw something she rarely found in white men of his position, real shame and anger directed at his own family. "Mr. Hartwell, I appreciate your concern, but you need not feel responsible for your wife's actions." "Of course I do," Robert replied firmly. 23 years of marriage have given me many opportunities to correct behavior like this, and I have failed miserably. Jasmine, may I ask you a direct question?" She nodded, curious. "You're not really a waitress, are you?" Jasmine smiled for the first time that evening. "What makes you think that?" "Your French is better than anyone else's in that room, including professors from renowned universities I know. Your posture, your articulation, the way you maintained your dignity under attack." Robert paused. "Besides, I recognize intelligence when I see it." "I'm an MBA student at Harvard," Jasmine admitted. "I work as a waitress to help my family and finish my studies." Robert closed his eyes, clearly processing the magnitude of the situation. Harvard. My God, Jasmine. Victoria attacked a Harvard student out of pure racial prejudice. "Mr. Hartwell, this happens more often than you realize. Your wife simply verbalized what many people think silently." "That doesn't make it acceptable," Robert said, his voice laden with an emotion that surprised Jasmine. "In fact, it makes it much worse. May I ask what your area of expertise is at Harvard?" "Analysis of systemic discrimination in corporate environments. I'm finishing a thesis on how prejudice affects professional opportunities for minorities." Robert was silent for a long moment. "Jasmine, may I make a proposal that might sound strange?" 15 minutes later, they were sitting in a secluded corner of the hotel lobby, away from the prying eyes of the event. Robert had ordered 2 coffees and spoke in a low voice, as if conspiring. "My company, Hartwell Development, has been facing serious diversity issues. The board is pushing for real change, not just cosmetic, especially after some recent incidents." Jasmine listened intently, her academic instincts picking up on every nuance. "I need someone with your expertise to conduct a thorough audit of our hiring practices, promotions, and corporate culture. Someone who understands both the theory and reality of discrimination in the workplace. Mr. Hartwell, that's very generous, but it's not generosity, Jasmine. It's urgent necessity and self-interest. My company needs real change, and you clearly have the knowledge and experience to implement it. Robert slid a card across the table. External consulting, payment in line with market standards for specialists of your caliber. You would retain complete autonomy over methods and conclusions. Jasmine took the card, feeling the weight of the possibilities. Why are you doing this? Because I spent 23 years living with a woman whose prejudices I silently tolerated. Because I built a company that probably replicates the same systemic problems you study. And because, frankly, after what I witnessed today, I need to do something meaningful to repair the damage my family causes in the world. At that moment, Victoria appeared in the lobby, looking for her husband. When she saw him talking to Jasmine, her expression turned into a mask of barely concealed fury. "Robert dear," she said, approaching the table with a forced smile. "I was looking for you. What are you doing here with her?" "Victoria, I'm offering Jasmine a position as a consultant at the company." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Victoria looked between her husband and Jasmine as if she had just witnessed marital betrayal. "You're joking, right?" Victoria laughed, but the sound came out high-pitched and nervous. "Robert, she's a waitress. She's an MBA student at Harvard specializing in exactly the area where our company needs help." Victoria visibly paled. "Harvard?" "Yes, Victoria. The woman you publicly humiliated tonight is a highly qualified academic who is working here to help her family." Jasmine observed the dynamics between the couple with the clinical eye of someone who studies social behavior. Victoria was clearly in shock, but also quickly calculating how to minimize the damage to her reputation. "Well, Robert, even if that's true, it doesn't mean we should make rash decisions based on feelings of guilt." "It's not guilt, Victoria. It's recognition of competence and real business need." Victoria addressed Jasmine directly for the first time since the initial humiliation. "Darling, I'm sure you understand that sometimes misunderstandings happen at social events. Perhaps we should all just forget about tonight's minor disagreements." Victoria's desperate attempt to minimize her cruelty as a misunderstanding was so transparent that Jasmine almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Ms. Hartwell, there was no misunderstanding. Your comments were very clear and direct." Victoria forced another smile. "Of course, dear. But intelligent people like you surely understand that sometimes social context can be complicated." "Actually," Jasmine replied calmly, "people with my academic background tend to be very precise about context and meaning, especially when it comes to documented racial discrimination." The word documented made Victoria recoil slightly. Documented. Robert watched his wife's expression and understood immediately. "Victoria, were you recorded?" Jasmine neither confirmed nor denied it, but her eloquent silence said it all. Victoria began to understand that this evening had become much more complicated than a simple humiliation of an employee. "Jasmine," Robert said, rising from the table, "I await your response to the consulting proposal. My assistant will contact you tomorrow with the contract details." As the couple walked away, Jasmine could hear the beginning of a heated discussion. Victoria had realized too late that she had attacked the wrong person, at the wrong time, in the wrong way. Back in the bathroom, Jasmine checked her recorder again and smiled. 23 minutes of explicit racial discrimination, followed by 15 minutes of a desperate attempt at damage control. For her thesis, this was gold. For her career, it was an unexpected opportunity to implement real change at an important company. But as she prepared to return to the dining room and finish her night's work, Jasmine felt that something much bigger was taking shape. The humiliation Victoria had tried to impose was becoming the foundation of something that would change not only her own life, but potentially the culture of an entire company. What Victoria didn't yet understand was that she had attacked not just a waitress, but a future expert on corporate discrimination who would now have direct access to her own husband's company's internal systems. The irony was delicious, but Jasmine knew that true justice would come through meticulous work, systemic change, and measurable results. As she checked her reflection one last time, Jasmine realized that tonight had marked the end of one phase of her life and the beginning of something completely new. Victoria had tried to put her in her place, unaware that she was actually catapulting her into a position of power that she would use to ensure that others never had to endure the same humiliation. The waitress was about to become the consultant. And when that happened, it would be Victoria who would discover where she really belonged in a world where competence and character mattered more than inherited privileges. 3 weeks later, Victoria Hartwell woke up with a strange feeling in her stomach. Her phone showed 47 missed calls and hundreds of unread messages. When she opened the first link Margaret had sent at 6 a.m., she felt as if the ground had opened up beneath her feet. Business executive attacked for racial discrimination. Viral audio exposes Boston elite, screamed the Boston Herald headline. Below it was a photo of her at the gala event, her expression of disdain frozen for eternity. The 23-minute audio was being played on every major radio station in the city. Every venomous word she had uttered against Jasmine echoed crystal clear over the airwaves, accompanied by indignant comments from presenters and devastating testimony from people who had witnessed the scene. Victoria ran down the stairs, finding Robert in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and an expression she had never seen before. Cold. Distant. Final. "Robert, you have to do something," she cried, waving her cell phone. "This is a coordinated attack. That waitress is trying to destroy us." "Victoria," Robert said calmly, without looking up from his newspaper, "that waitress is now our new corporate diversity consultant. And after listening to this audio, I completely understand why our company desperately needs her services." Victoria froze. "What did you say?" "Jasmine started yesterday. Her first project will be a complete audit of our corporate culture, including analysis of all employees in leadership positions." Robert finally looked at her. "I imagine you understand the implications." At that moment, Victoria's phone rang. It was Patricia Whitmore, chair of the board of the tennis club where Victoria had been a member for 15 years. "Victoria, the board met in emergency session this morning," Patricia said without preamble. "Your membership has been revoked effective immediately. The behavior in the audio recording is incompatible with our values." Before Victoria could respond, the call ended. Then her phone exploded with notifications. The WhatsApp group Ladies Who Lunch, her social elite, was buzzing with messages. All about her. "I can't believe I've been around someone like that for years. My daughter goes to Harvard. I wonder how many Jasmines she's humiliated without us knowing. James said he doesn't want to do business with Hartwell Development anymore." Victoria opened her Instagram account and discovered she had lost 3,000 followers overnight. The comments on her latest photos were devastating. "What a disgusting person. Rich racist exposed. I hope she learns something from this." Margaret called, crying. "Victoria, Charles canceled the contract for the office we were renovating. He said he doesn't want to be associated with toxic elements. I'm socially ruined." By this point, Victoria was hyperventilating. "Robert, you have to make that audio disappear. Sue that woman. Do something." Robert slowly stood up. "Victoria, you recorded this. Every word came out of your mouth. There's nothing to sue except your own cruelty." The phone rang again. It was Dr. Harrison, director of the charitable foundation where Victoria had served as volunteer vice president for 8 years. "Victoria, the board has voted unanimously to remove you from all positions. Effective immediately." His voice was icy. "Frankly, discovering that one of our leaders expressed such discrimination was shocking to all of us." Victoria collapsed into a chair. In less than 24 hours, she had lost her social standing, her friendships, her charity commitments, and the trust of her own community. "You know what the most ironic part is?" Robert said, folding the newspaper. "Jasmine didn't even have to do anything. She just documented your true nature and let your own words speak for themselves." At that very moment, Jasmine was at the Hartwell Development Office, being introduced to the Human Resources team. Dressed in an elegant suit and carrying a briefcase full of proposals for structural changes, she had gone from humiliated waitress to respected consultant in less than a month. "Starting today," Robert announced during the department meeting, "Jasmine Washington will lead our diversity and inclusion initiative. She has full authority to implement necessary changes in our corporate culture." The employees greeted her with respectful curiosity. Many had heard the viral audio and understood the significance of her hiring. Jasmine addressed the team with the same serenity she had maintained during the humiliation. "My goal is not to punish anyone, but to create an environment where everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of their background or appearance. Meanwhile, Victoria remained locked in her home, watching her social life crumble through social media. Each notification brought a new humiliation: cancelled invitations, lost friendships, doors closing. Margaret had stopped answering her calls. Patricia Whitmore posted a photo from the tennis club with the caption, "Celebrating our true values of inclusion and respect." Even her hairdresser had cancelled her appointments, claiming to be fully booked. Robert went up to the bedroom that night and found Victoria crying in front of the mirror. 23 years, he said simply. 23 years I lived with this person and pretended not to see. Robert, please, can we talk about this? It was a terrible misunderstanding. Victoria, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was you being exactly who you always were, but this time someone was recording it. He walked over to the closet and began removing his clothes. My lawyers will deliver the divorce papers tomorrow. The house is yours, but our shared assets will be divided according to the court's ruling. Victoria stood up desperately. You can't be serious. Because of a waitress. Because of a Harvard student you attacked out of pure racial prejudice, Robert corrected. Because of 23 years of tolerating your cruelty. Because of discovering that my wife is exactly the kind of person I've always despised. As Robert packed his bags, Victoria finally understood the magnitude of what she had lost. Not just a marriage, but her entire social identity, built on foundations of privilege that now proved as fragile as glass. The next morning, Jasmine woke up in her apartment near Harvard, preparing for another day of work that would change not only her own life, but potentially the culture of an entire company. Her phone displayed messages of support from colleagues, professors, and even strangers who had heard her story. What had started as a night of extra work to pay the bills had turned into an opportunity to implement real, measurable, and lasting change. And all because a privileged woman had completely underestimated who she was attacking. While Victoria faced the collapse of her previous life, Jasmine walked confidently toward a future she would build with competence, dignity, and the strength that comes from turning humiliation into purpose. The waitress Victoria had tried to put in her place was about to redefine what it really meant to occupy a position of power and use it for good. 6 months later, Jasmine was promoted to Director of Diversity at Hartwell Development, implementing policies that became a national model. Her private consulting business grew exponentially, serving large corporations seeking real change. Victoria lived reclusive in her empty mansion. Divorced, friendless, banished from the social circles she once dominated. Her pleas for forgiveness on social media only generated more criticism. Desperate attempts to rebuild her image failed systematically. Robert married a civil rights lawyer and donated half his fortune to college scholarships for students like Jasmine. At the Harvard graduation ceremony, Jasmine addressed hundreds of students. Never let anyone define your worth based on prejudice. The best revenge is success they never imagined possible. Victoria's audio still circulated as an example in classes on racial discrimination. Her cruelty had become a case study on the consequences of prejudice. Jasmine turned humiliation into purpose, building a legacy that would change lives for generations. If you believe that no one should be judged by the color of their skin or their origin, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that underestimating people can cost much more than any fortune.